It's a matter of feeling with me." He contradicted himself by plunging into an exposition of motifs. By a tacit agreement they ignored the significant thing between them, ignored the slipping away of the ground on which they had stood together hitherto. All through the love music of the second act, until the hunting horns of Mark break in upon the dream, Ann Veronica's consciousness was flooded with the perception of a man close beside her, preparing some new thing to say to her, preparing, perhaps, to touch her, stretching hungry invisible tentacles about her. She tried to think what she should do in this eventuality or that. Her mind had been and was full of the thought of Capes, a huge, generalized Capes lover. And in some incomprehensible way Ramage was confused with Capes. She had a grotesque disposition to persuade herself that this was really Capes who surrounded her, as it were, with wings of desire. The fact that it was her trusted friend making illicit love to her remained, in spite of all her effort, an insignificant thing in her mind. The music confused and distracted her, and made her struggle against a feeling of intoxication. Her head swam. That was the inconvenience of it. Her head was swimming. The music throbbed into the warnings that preceded the king's eruption. Abruptly he gripped her wrist. "I love you, Ann Veronica. I love you with all my heart and soul." She put her face closer to his. She felt the warm nearness of his. "Don't!" she said, and wrenched her wrist from his retaining hand. "My God, Ann Veronica!" he said, struggling to keep his hold upon her. "My God! Tell me now! Tell me you love me!" His expression was as it were rapaciously furtive. She answered in whispers, for there was the white arm of a woman in the next box peeping beyond the partition within a yard of him. "My hand! This isn't the place." He released her hand and talked in eager undertones against an auditory background of urgency and distress. "Ann Veronica," he said, "I tell you this is love. I love the soles of your feet. I love your very breath. I have tried not to tell you, tried to be simply your friend. It is no good. I want you. I worship you. I would do anything, I would give anything to make you mine. Do you hear me? Do you hear what I am saying? Love!" He held her arm and abandoned it again at her quick defensive movement. For a long time neither spoke again. She sat drawn together in her chair in the corner of the box, at a loss what to say or do, afraid, curious, perplexed. It seemed to her that it was her duty to get up and clamor to go home to her room, to protest against his advances as an insult. But she did not in the least want to do that. These sweeping dignitaries were not within the compass of her will. She remembered she liked Ramage, and owed things to him, and she was interested. She was profoundly interested. He was in love with her. She tried to grasp all the welter of values in the situation simultaneously and draw some conclusion from their disorder. He began to talk again in quick undertones that she could not clearly hear. "I have loved you," he was saying, "ever since you sat on that gate and talked. I have always loved you. I don't care what divides us. I don't care what else there is in the world. I want you beyond measure or reckoning." His voice rose and fell amidst the music and the singing of Tristan and King Mark, like a voice heard in a badly connected telephone. She stared at his pleading face. She turned to the stage, and Tristan was wounded in Kurvenal's arms, with Isolde at his feet, and King Mark, the incarnation of masculine force and obligation, the masculine creditor of love and beauty, stood over him. And the second climax was ending in wreaths and reek of melodies. And then the curtain was coming down in a series of short rushes. The music had ended, and the people were stirring and breaking out into applause, and the lights of the auditorium were resuming. The lighting up pierced the obscurity of the box, and Ramage stopped his urgent flow of words abruptly and sat back. This helped to restore Ann Veronica's self-command. She turned her eyes to him again, and saw her late friend and pleasant and trusted companion, who had seen fit suddenly to change into a lover, babbling interesting, inacceptable things. He looked eager and flushed and troubled. His eyes caught at hers with passionate inquiries. "Tell me," he said. "Speak to me." She realized it was possible to be sorry for him, acutely sorry for the situation. Of course this thing was absolutely impossible. But she was disturbed, mysteriously disturbed. She remembered abruptly that she was really living upon his money. She leaned forward and addressed him. "Mr. Ramage," she said, "please don't talk like this." He made to speak and did not. "I don't want you to do it, to go on talking to me. I don't want to hear you. If I had known that you had meant to talk like this I wouldn't have come here." "But how can I help it? How can I keep silence?" "Please," she insisted, "please, not now. I must talk with you. I must say what I have to say. But not now. Not here." "It came," he said. "I never planned it, and now I have begun." She felt acutely that he was entitled to explanations, and as acutely that explanations were impossible that night. She wanted to think. "Mr. Ramage," she said, "I can't. Not now. Will you please? Not now, or I must go." He stared at her, trying to guess at the mystery of her thoughts. "You don't want to go?" "No, but I must. I ought. I must talk about this. Indeed, I must. Not now." "But I love you. I love you unendurably." "Then don't talk to me now. I don't want you to talk to me now. There is a place. This isn't the place. You have misunderstood. I can't explain." They regarded one another, each blinded to the other. "Forgive me," he decided to say at last, and his voice had a little quiver of emotion, and he laid his hand on hers upon her knee. "I am the most foolish of men. I was stupid, stupid and impulsive beyond measure to burst upon you in this way. I am a love-sick idiot, and not accountable for my actions. Will you forgive me if I say no more?" She looked at him with perplexed, earnest eyes. "Pretend," he said, "that all I have said hasn't been said, and let us go on with our evening. Why not? Imagine I've had a fit of hysteria and that I've come round." "Yes," she said, and abruptly she liked him enormously. She felt this was the sensible way out of this oddly sinister situation. He still watched her and questioned her. "And let us have a talk about this some other time, somewhere where we can talk without interruption. Will you?" She thought, and it seemed to him she had never looked so self-disciplined and deliberate and beautiful. "Yes," she said, "that is what we ought to do." But now she doubted again of the quality of the armistice they had just made. He had a wild impulse to shout. "Agreed," he said with queer exultation, and his grip tightened on her hand. "And to-night we are friends." "We are friends," said Ann Veronica, and drew her hand quickly away from him. "To-night we are as we have always been, except that this music we have been swimming in is divine. While I have been pestering you, have you heard it? At least you heard the first act, and all the third act is love-sick music, Tristan dying and Isolde coming to crown his death. Wagner had just been in love when he wrote it all. It begins with that queer piccolo solo. Now I shall never hear it but what this evening will come pouring back over me." The lights sank. The prelude to the third act was beginning. The music rose and fell in crowded intimations of lovers separated with scars and memories between them. And the curtain went reefing up to display Tristan lying wounded on his couch and the shepherd crouching with his pipe. Part 2. They had their explanations the next evening, but they were explanations in quite other terms than Ann Veronica had anticipated, quite other and much more startling and illuminating terms. Ramage came for her at her lodgings, and she met him graciously and kindly, as a queen who knows she must needs give sorrow to a faithful liege. She was unusually soft and gentle in her manner to him. He was wearing a new silk hat, with a slightly more generous brim than its predecessor, and it suited his type of face, robbed his dark eyes a little of their aggressiveness, and gave him a solid and dignified and benevolent air. A faint anticipation of triumph showed